Hey everyone, it's Robert Mays. The NFL playoffs are here, and we've got you covered on the Athletic Football Show. From Wild Card Weekend all the way through Super Bowl 59, my co-host Derek Klassen and I will guide you through every game, matchup, and big-time performance on the way to one team lifting the Lombardi Trophy in New Orleans. Catch the Athletic Football Show wherever you listen to podcasts.
The Athletic.
We're on the cusp of the 2025 MotoGP season build-up really beginning as the first team launches happen, and it seems like a pretty good time for us to make a bunch of predictions about what will happen in the year when Marc Marquez lines up on the red Ducati, when Fermin Aldiger joins the MotoGP grid to the delight of Val Khorounzhiy, and when Aprilia fields the reigning world champion Jorge Martin, hopefully with an actual number one plate on his bike. So this is the Race MotoGP podcast. I'm Matt Beer, and to make some predictions, I've gathered Megan White, Simon Patterson, and the aforementioned Val, and I had a few ideas for what I'd get them to predict, but then I thought I'd check in with the Race Members Club on Patreon, see if anyone had any ideas in there, and unsurprisingly, all your ideas, members, were better than mine, so I've just structured the episode around your thoughts and what you want these guys to make some Larry predictions about. So let's go straight into one from Connor, who says, which of the riders changing teams for 2025 will regret moving team first? And I'm going to start with Val for this one.
Yeah, of course. You give me the hardest one. Give me the most difficult one. Where I've looked at the grid and didn't really have any particularly good ideas or. What? Oh boy. All right. I've done a. There's a cop-out answer that I'm not quite going for. I'm going to go for a different cop-out answer. I think Marco Bezzecchi and Aprilia might be complicated. Not because he's gonna bomb, but because going to Aprilia to be second rider to a rider that you don't necessarily hugely super well get on with is maybe not as enticing as having a factory spec Ducati and a factory contract at Ducati, which would have been available at some point, and I think would have even potentially been available for 2025 if he really put his mind to it instead of prioritizing a works ride.
That's a really good point. I'd kind of forgotten that in the chess game that was unfolding during summer of what we're definitely calling last year, Bezzecchi made that move to Aprilia when there was still a chance that he was going to end up being the one getting the nod for the 2025 Ducati if it stayed at VR46. And if that bike goes massively well, as surely it will, in Fabio Di Gianantonio's hands, then Bez has got to be looking at that going, oh, whoops, the year I should have moved, I stayed, and the year I should have, the other way around, stayed, I moved. Megan, any thoughts on Val's pick, and have you got a completely different one?
I actually, having listened to what Val said, would probably agree with Val's point of view. I came into this with a different answer, which I'm assuming is what Val's cop-out was, which is Bastianini. Yes. Although regret moving, I think perhaps suggests more of an element of choice than Bastianini maybe had, which was you just not staying. If anyone else was getting that bike, it would have been Martin, but Marquez got it, so he was like third in line. So yeah, Bastianini would have been my pick, but actually I think that the Bezzecchi one is a really good one. You know, he, as you said, Matt, like he's had now, this is his second year where he's made a decision that might prove to, you know, team-wise not be the right one. But he might also, conversely, accept that he's that number two rider, going into it fully eyes open and go, you know, I'll take what I can get. So it'll definitely be an interesting dynamic there for sure, as Val mentioned, with their, relationship history.
He could have stayed at Ducati, where they do like him quite a bit on a works contract. I think that is the general impression. That works contract, in theory, and in the numbers that have been put down, would have been less lucrative than what he's getting as a factory KTM rider, in theory. Now, you know, the situation with KTM money, the situation with, you know, it's all very much in the theoretical stage right now. But if we presume that it does materialize, then I don't think he'll regret it too much. But at the same time, so the KTM he's signed for and the KTM that exists right now are regrettably two different entities, which does not help.
Well, and also as well, like you suggested he didn't have a choice in moving. Megan, Val made the point that he could have stayed at a different part of Ducati. He had a choice of where he moved to. You know, he had the Aprilia option and he went for Tech 3 KTM instead. All Val's making a wiggly hand gesture.
Yeah, I'm not sure they were like committed to making him an offer at the expense of Marco Bezzecchi. Maybe at some point, but there was never a clear vibe that like Bezzecchi was their third choice. I think by the time it became clear that they were losing Maverick Vinales, I think they were already quite happy to take Bezzecchi as their spare option instead of necessarily going to Bastianini. But also by then, Bastianini probably also made his intentions quite clear. So I would, in an ideal world, I'd quite like to rerun the scenario and ask Aprilia straight up, this guy or this guy, who would you take? And I'm not 100% sure what their answer would be.
Simon, are you agreeing with either of these two, or have you got a different vibe?
I mean, Bastianini's the easy answer, and I think he will come to regret it. But, I mean, from the noises we've heard over the last few weeks, the person that's perhaps regretting their choice the most is Pedro Acosta, because his management have been quite publicly slamming KTM for not telling them that they had financial irregularities, problems going into this season, and now he signed a 2-year factory deal where they don't know what the future of the team is going to hold. I mean, I would argue that perhaps his management should have been a little bit more aware of what was going on, and that it's not entirely on KTM's back, but we haven't had a race yet, and one of the championship star riders is out attacking his new team. So I'm going to say that that's fairly conclusively who is going to regret moving first, because they're already regretting it and they haven't even raced the bike yet.
And technically, they've barely moved. They've only just sidled through an internal door, which they probably were doing quite a lot as last season went on anyway. Connor's question was about which rider will regret moving first. Obviously, we're asking to kind of see into riders' souls to know what they're thinking. Which of these people do you think is going to be expressing it publicly first? It's quite a bold thing to be slating your new employer. Simon, you've given a hint that Acosta is already on fire on that front. Megan?
His management are.
Yeah. Megan, who's going to make the dissatisfaction most obvious?
Maybe Maverick.
Yeah, we were all going to say Maverick, weren't we?
Going on his past endeavours with being unhappy, maybe he might say it first.
He'll say it first, and then he will forget saying it the next day. No, I mean, yeah.
Listeners, there is going to be a chance to start watching at least clips of the Race MotoGP podcast on our YouTube channel as 2025 goes on. We're not actually recording this particular one for video, which was a shame because the kind of array of facial expressions and hand gestures over Maverick Vinales there was really quite visually striking. So I'll be sure to trigger that in future podcasts that are appearing in Vision as well. On to our second prediction question. Maggie says, on a similar note, which teammate relationship is most likely to become strained and or publicly acrimonious first? Megan, you can take first pick on this one.
I had two thoughts here. I initially thought maybe Martin Bezzecchi because they've previously not really seen eye to eye. But I wonder if, as I said, if Bezzecchi's just going to accept that he's number two, like Martin's the world champion, sorry, like you have no chance, you're number two, accept it, get on with it. So maybe those guys, or Bastianini Vinales, just because in the past, neither of them have been any stranger to speaking their mind. So maybe those guys.
Val?
Yeah, those are both reasonable guesses. I mean, the one I put down was Martin Bezzecchi, but for a more fun one, I agree with Raul Fernandez. I think that's entirely possible. Just there's a lot of potential triggers for it, and I think they are two characters who, while both immensely likable, I think quite possible to generate some friction between them just through normal racing stuff in those career circumstances. Because ultimately, for Agura to have a really good 2025, if he has a really good 2025, that ends Raul Fernandez's MotoGP career. I think I don't see a scenario in which both of them come out of 2025 in the black.
Yeah, I get that, because given how up and down, well, say up and down, it's like a flat line with some little sparks upwards, like little blips of life. Raul Fernandez has been in MotoGP so far. If Agura doesn't really put some pressure on him at minimum, people are going to be saying, okay, can Agura do it in MotoGP? Because Fernandez hasn't convinced us, and so how good can this guy be? So although I wouldn't have thought of this as a fractious personality one, in terms of what each needs to prove, I do see that point. Simon, where are you looking to for disharmony and angst?
I'm afraid I'm going to be boring and agree with Megan. I think it's the Martin Bezzecchi camp that I see the most chance. Either that or Bastianini Vinales, simply because I think that it's going to need someone who's gone from a bike that's worse than the one that they were on to add that final spark that's needed to really, really anger people. Everyone wants us to say Bagnaia, Marc Marquez, and it's just not going to happen. Those two guys are going to have a crazier year. We've already talked about this. It's not going to be them because the bike's so good that, all misdoings will be easily forgiven and forgotten because they're going to go straight back to winning regardless of what happens between the two of them. It's the guys that are going to struggle that are going to really suffer and fall out with each other. And right now, the ones that I think are going to make the biggest step from really, really good bike to not as good bike is probably Bezzecchi and Jorge Martin. I mean, no one's winning a world championship in an Aprilia this season.
The problem with Bastianini and Vinales and because I don't think like character wise and the situation wise, not necessarily. I think because they've also KTM sort of a situation where you fight all three other riders, not just necessarily your teammates. And I think, maybe fighting Acosta would be a tall order, but let's see. But I think the problem is, obviously, Vinales is going to qualify 5th every race. Bastianini will qualify 20th every race, and they'll meet on lap 10 every time. So that's the problem. I kid. Look, I've never been accused of being a Maverick hater, so if this all sounds excessively harsh, it's me covering for the fact that I would love nothing more than to talk about Maverick for 60 minutes every time.
And there's definitely podcasts where you have done that and it's been cut out in the edit. Yeah, I think any situation involving Maverick, the Vinales Bastianini thing is interesting because you could look at that on one hand and go, okay, these are two people who've had their time in top manufacturer teams. They're in a sort of not downward phase of their career, but they're coming to KTM to like be the experienced, reliable, but quick people, bringing knowledge, driving a whole project forward. However, that project now has no money and a really uncertain future, and it's got this super kid on top of it in Pedro Acosta, who all the attention's going to be on. And if Vinales or Bastianini, who are peaky, to say the least, in very different ways, are under-delivering, it's KTM, so Pit Buyer is going to be telling everyone and probably sacking one of them, maybe in the middle of a free practice session. There's a lot there that can go wrong, potentially. Also, I'm going to take issue with this Marquez Bagnaia will be fine thing, Simon. Yes, they've got a quick bike. Surely they have a quick bike. But that surely means it's them versus each other for the championship. So if something goes wrong, okay, they'll win again next week. But only one of them will win again. Only one of them will be world champion. And you've got Bagnaia's whole reputation of being a proper legend versus a guy who sort of was there at the right time on the right bike, so won more titles than some other people, is at stake against Marquez. Marquez proving he's still what he once was is at stake against Bagnaia. Okay, they're not going to Rossi and Lorenzo this in terms of out-and-out vitriol, but the stakes are so high. There's got to be sort of, even if it's like frowny, steely-eyed, taciturn tension, it's going to be there. Megan?
I don't think that Pecco will do any flinging of the proverbial because he's got a really good friend who likes to say lots of things on podcasts who can do it for him. So, if all else fails, then he can just get someone else to slag off Marquez. Jokes aside, they so far have obviously been quite keen to be like best mates. It works for everyone if they keep things cordial, at least publicly. If the focus is on the publicly bit, it will be like best mates. If they have a fight in the back of the garage, fine. But I do think that for everyone's sake, those two maintaining a really good public image is in everyone's interests, and I think that it would take a lot for that facade to fall. I think.
I agree. I agree with both Matt and Megan. I think publicly these are two guys who are very used to very quickly repairing any broken bridges, but I do also expect that there will be bridges broken in certain moments, a thing said in the heat of the moment after the end of the race, something or other that gets repaired quickly, but maybe only publicly and privately simmers a little bit longer. Ultimately, it is probably going to be a proxy war fought through Spanish and Italian media, isn't it? That's my best guess.
This is the thing. I think we'll have as many flashpoints off track potential. I can see if something that one likes for development, if there's an engine spec decision coming in pre-season testing or something, do they go with Marquez, who they've ruptured their whole system to bring in? Do they go with Pecco, who's been there forever and achieved so much success for them? Unless these two agree on everything and don't cross paths in a rough way on track at any point in this 75 race season, there's too much weighing on this. There's got to be something, but it won't be like 2015 because Marquez is too smart a character, and this is not an era where you win public battles by letting them overspill. I think the 2020s are different for that. However, if you want to go back to the 2010s, we are revisiting... That was such an unsubtle link, Matt. That's just terribly clumsy, but I don't care. 2015 Revisited is our new series for the Race Members Club only, launching later this month, because this is definitely January 2025. We're going to start recording in the next couple of days as well. Val has been ferociously researching the 2015 season. Simon, Megan, how are you doing on that front?
I'm going into this having never seen any of it. I've no idea. I don't know what happens. Who knows? I will find out when I watch it all, and you'll probably just see various messages in Slack of me going, oh, "No way!" So I look forward to it.
I, as someone that still doesn't want to do 2025 or 2015, I'm putting it off as long as I can. Plus, I've got a terrible memory, so the closer to the recording I watch, the less chance there is of me mixing up which
was 2025 in there a Freudian slip? You said I don't want to do 2025 and all that.
Which teammates relationship is most likely.
Maybe given that Megan is completely new to 2015, she should do her own 2015 predictions episode based on the entry list before we get going. Let's see. Anyway, if you want to get your ears on that as soon as it's all released, join the Race Members Club. You can find us on Patreon by hunting for the race, or go to the-race.com/members-club. You can get a 7-day free trial on Patreon, so you can see if you like what we're up to on there, and then I think you'll stick around because we're having so much fun on there. That's where all the questions for this episode came from, in the community section, where like-minded people just chat about MotoGP a lot, and we drop in whenever we can as well. There's also all the exclusive rider interviews from the end of the 2024 season in full, uncut, on the Patreon and Members Club feeds as well for you to dig out.
I use the New York Times Games app every single day.
I love playing Connections.
With Connections, I need to twist my brain to see the different categories.
I think I know this connection. Look, Bath is a city in England, Sandwich is a city in England, Reading is a city in England, and I'm going to guess Derby is a city in England.
I started Wordle 194 days ago, and I haven't missed a day.
The New York Times Games app has all the games right there.
I absolutely love spelling bee. I always have to get Genius.
I've seen you yell at it and say that should be a word.
Totally should be a word.
Sudoku is kind of my version of lifting heavy weights at the gym.
At this point, I'm probably more consistent with doing the crossword than brushing my teeth.
When I can finish a hard puzzle without hints, I feel like the smartest person in the world.
When I have to look up a clue to help me, I'm learning something new.
It gives me joy every single day.
Start playing in the New York Times Games app.
You can download it at nytimes.com/gamesapp.
For those of you listeners who just were having an ad break in the main feed, the conversation we were having at 2015 during that ad break was absolutely spectacular and bodes really well for the series that we're going to do on the Members Club. Anyway, back to the 2025. JW asks, what top 10 points finisher from 2024 is least likely to be in the top 10 at the end of 2025? I think there's a few obvious candidates for this, but I'm going to go to Simon, notorious Franco Morbidelli sympathiser, first. Which 2024 top 10 finisher will not be in the 2025 championship, Simon?
Well, I mean, Maverick Vinales. He was 7th on an Aprilia. He's going to be further back in the satellite KTM amid everything that's going on there, and just Maverick being Maverick. I mean, we've seen in the past when he went to Aprilia from Yamaha, he's a slow adapter. I think we're going to see him struggle at the start of his season, and I would be stunned if he makes it into the top 10.
Last I checked, P1 was part of the top 10, so...
Whenever Val said that he wasn't a Maverick Vinales hater earlier...
Yeah, indeed. Yeah.
I think you're taking it a bit too far, Val.
That did prompt me to check back and note that Maverick was only 11th in his first Aprilia season on a bike that I suspect to be more competitive than the satellite KTM.
Well, I mean, was he 11th on the strength of the early season, like full season, or...
I haven't worked out the individual points progression through each round. I just flicked to the championship standings and went, no, not top 10. But that...
Yeah, but you mean, is it the part season where he left Yamaha?
No, I think that was 21, wasn't it? So I'm going on 22 when he's in the full season on the Aprilia.
Okay, yeah, got it.
He managed to be in the top 10 on his half Yamaha, half Aprilia, half sacked season, which was quite impressive. Val, who are you kicking out of the 2024 top 10?
I thought this was an awesome question because I looked at the top 10 and I was like, you can make a really good case that the top 10 will just stay the same, same names. I think you can make a really, really good case for that. I don't think there are actually like super obvious candidates for exclusion at all, and I don't think there are super obvious candidates to replace people. I think like Fabio Quartararo is the only super obvious candidate to come in and like Yamaha. I think I'm gonna cop out again and pick Enea Bastianini, but it's close.
Megan?
I'm not a hater, but Enea Bastianini.
I thought this was a harder question than you guys might have found it that JW threw in for us, because I think there's so many candidates, like you guys have talked about. There's people dropping down to worse bikes. Bastianini, like you said, Viñales, Franco Morbidelli is going from the best bike on the grid to an old Ducati. He was only just in the top 10 by the skin of his teeth this year. Yamaha could genuinely improve. Bears is on an Aprilia. I think there's going to be a big shuffle. Whose hand went up first? I think Megan. Or it's everyone. Megan, Val, Simon. Go in that order. I'll just sit back.
I forgot about Franco Morbidelli when I was making this decision. So, Franco Morbidelli's probably a good one.
Factually, Franco Morbidelli isn't going anywhere. He's keeping the same bike and wheeling it into a different garage, which is actually a very important distinction to make, because we think the GB24 will still be quite good on the same tires, same everything. In 25, he wasn't amazing on the 24, obviously, but he was capable to salvage a top 10 from last season.
And there's 2 less Ducatis to get in front of him.
Okay. Yeah,
that's a good point.
That's a point.
I'm actually a little bit disappointed that there wasn't a very straightforward answer to this. Whenever Aleix just scored 2 points more to beat Fabio D'Antonio, but then I remember that the way that the Honda spits riders off, there's every possibility Aleix will still do like 3/4 of a season and be the top scoring Honda rider. So
yeah, but that's still going to be the top scoring Honda rider, which is not going to be top 10 in the championship. In other predictions that maybe we play back in December this year and go, oh Matt, you were so wrong. Look at all those Joan Mir wins. Right, a group of questions around the theme now of people not on Ducatis winning races. So I'm going to do a kind of show of hands on this one rather than giving it to you guys individually. Greg says, will any non-Ducatis win? So do any of you think Ducati will do a complete 100% clean sweep of the whole season? No. Simon, which rider/team do you expect to nick a couple?
I mean, there's no way Jorge Martin doesn't win something, right? It's just incredible that he doesn't. Plus, look how often Pedro Acosta was close to doing it in his rookie season. I think both of them have to sneak the occasional one here and there. And that's before we even start looking at others like Bezzecchi, who in a different bike might be more competitive. Maverick, who could just turn up at Coda and win it by like 4 hours because it's Maverick. It's Maverick doing Maverick things and then retire happy because he's achieved his goal of winning in 4 manufacturers and everything's done.
True. Simon's covered half the grid there. Megan, any others or any of Simon's that you just think he's talking nonsense with?
Despite there being several questions here, I'd just written the word Martin, so that's my answer.
That answers most of these questions here, actually.
Martin. Some Martin. Yeah, there you go.
So we've got a kind of joint question where I've kind of grouped together questions from Matt, Graham Lee and James Stevenson, who all asked variations on who will be top non-Ducati. I think, Megan, your answer is Jorge Martin. Val, who have you got for this one?
Well, I'm assuming the KTMs will be on the grid and the salaries will be paid until I have a reason to assume otherwise. Pedro Acosta is the answer.
And Simon?
Oh, I mean, I'm somewhere between those 2 answers. As things stand right now, it's Pedro Acosta, but we need to see where Martin and the Aprilia go over the course of preseason testing, and what sort of package develops out of that, because yeah, I mean, the expectation is that the level is higher there of those 2 things combined, of Martin and Aprilia together is higher than Acosta and KTM, but Acosta and KTM is the familiar one. So maybe one of them is going to be the fastest in the first half of the season and the other at the second half of the season, and I'm not hedging my bets at all with that answer.
So I'm trying to stay out the predictions in this for the benefit of podcast recording speeds and runtime, but I do have one for this. Brad Binder. Because it's just what happens. And whatever else is going on, somehow you look at it and Brad Binder is top non-Ducati at the end of the year. How did that happen again? Was Val agreeing with me with that hand gesture? Or
Yeah, completely possible. 100%.
I still think that's possible.
Yeah, for sure.
I could still see Acosta having these amazing peaks, but also having enough non-scores when Binder does score to make it end a little bit like 2024 did. Angelina asks, how many different riders will win a race? And I'd like a number and a list from each of you. Let's start with Val.
Right. I had 7.
Oh, and sprints count as races.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah, I had 7. I'm vaguely considering upgrading it to 8. But I had... Let's go 8, yeah. Let's go. 4 Ducatis, 2 KTMs, 2 Aprilias is my 8. The 4 Ducatis are obviously Mark and Pecco. I think Fabio Di Giannantonio probably, yes. And one of Alex Marquez, Franco Morbidelli, depending on the track. It's hard for me to commit. Alex Marquez at Sepang or Franco Morbidelli at Misano, or something like that. Let's say Alex Marquez. The 2 KTMs are Pedro Acosta and pick any of the 3, throw a dart at a dartboard. The 2 Aprilias are the 2 Works Aprilias. I think Marco Bezzecchi might get a good wet race or a good weird grip race and absolutely dog walk the field.
Yeah, I can see that. It's interesting that as much as, even though you agreed that Binder could be top non-Ducati on the grid, you don't necessarily see him being the one breaking through and winning a race, which also is a very Brad Binder thing to happen based on recent history.
I mean, he could be. He's one of the dartboard KTMs.
Well, yeah, but it's not even like the fact that a dartboard is even required when he's the works guy who you've just said could be 5th in the championship. Megan, what's your list? Any different to Val's?
I was just struggling to count to 7 or 8, depending on which it is. But I've gone for, obviously, both the factory Ducatis, Digia, Alex Marquez, both the Aprilias, but I think Bezzecchi will be a sprint, and it will be somewhere, as Val said, like Misano or somewhere like that, Mugello. And then Acosta and Binder. So whatever that adds up to, 8.
That adds up to 8, I think. Yeah,
quite uniform.
Binder, I've gone for because I like the first MotoGP race I ever watched was that 2021 Austria race that he won, and so I feel like he's got that in him again, just to do something mental.
just to not notice it's rained when everyone else is certain it has.
Yeah, it's raining. Don't care.
Yeah. Simon,
I've got 10.
Ooh, you're kind.
So Bezzecchi and Martin, I think Martin is basically expected to, and Bezzecchi has a really good chance to, like we said. I think at Ducati, I can see 5 out of their 6 winning races. I think Aldeguer only as a rookie is the one that won't, but I think that even Morbidelli came close enough this year in unusual circumstances that I wouldn't be surprised if he picks up a sprint at some point, especially with Martin out of the kind of the stand-ins in front of him every weekend, and Bastianini. KTM, I think Acosta will win a race for sure. I think Maverick will, because there will be certain circuits and certain weekends where Maverick does the Maverick thing. And I think Fabio Quartararo is going to win a race, because I think the Yamaha is improving slowly but steadily. If the V4 engine arrives and the new bike arrives in the middle of the season, and it's only arrived because it was faster than the bike that they already had, oh look, a surprise, that's going to just, there's enough things there that I won't be shocked if Quartararo wins a race this season. And Val's agreeing with me. Val hates Yamaha.
But Val loves Fabio, as we found out in his end of year rankings.
The ultimate contradiction.
Yeah. Well, Val hates Yamaha so much because his love for Fabio is so great, and Yamaha's pace has been an insult to Fabio's greatness. This is the issue. So I have to say, this
is character assassination. Val is famously impartial.
One final thing on how many riders will win and where and stuff. Greg's kind of part 2 question alongside will non-Ducatis win was where? Are there any circuits where any of you 3 think Ducati... Maybe it's not Ducati being vulnerable because that bike is such an all-rounder, but whether the kind of circumstances and characteristics will really work for another bike.
Phillip Island is always the wildcard circuit.
For the Aprilia?
It's always the wildcard circuit, isn't it? It's always the one where it doesn't really matter how good or bad your bike is. And by that point in the year, I think other bikes will have changed and improved enough that maybe that's the one where there can be still surprises. Plus, obviously, Maverick wants to win at Coda.
I would really struggle to go specific track, because just running through the season we saw in 24, it felt like whatever the track configuration, whatever the type of corners, whatever, etc. It like mostly just determined which of Aprilia or KTM was closest to Ducati, but Ducati was still ahead by kind of a fairly consistent margin with a consistent amount of bikes. I don't know, like Valencia, Jerez, maybe. And I don't like Phillip Island for it, even though Phillip Island is chaos. And the reason I don't like Phillip Island for it is Marc Marquez rides at Ducati now.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah. I just feel like the days of being able to say, oh, this bike has amazing cornering speed but no power, this bike is all straight line muscle but you don't want to be riding it through a bend of any kind, oh, that's gone, really. Most bikes are now kind of merging into all-rounders. The only certainty in life was if the sun is shining and you're not in Europe and the Aprilia will be on fire somewhere.
Literally.
On to rookies now. This is a bit of a two-parter, which we'll kind of join them together. Angelina asks who will be Rookie of the Year. We'll get to that via this question from Duncan Bertram, who says, where will each of the rookies rank in the championship standings relative to the other riders on the same bike? So we've got Ayagura among the Aprilias, Firmin Aldiger among the Ducatis, and Somkiat Chantra among the Hondas. Have I forgotten any rookies? Whew, that's a win. So my first question is, do any of you three expect any of those three to not be the lowest placed rider for their manufacturer?
No.
So Duncan, pretty universal here. So Somkiat Chantra, he's coming into MotoGP off a not great Moto2 season. I think there's plenty of talent in Chantra, but there's not a convincing case for him to be in MotoGP beyond the kind of commercial appeal of the backer and where he comes from. Don't think that's the reason he shouldn't be in MotoGP, just it means expectations are low there. But you did, I think Simon or Val possibly referred to Agura versus Fernandez as being quite interesting at Trackhouse Aprilia this year. That's the one I think could be the quirkier battle. I can see Agura outperforming Fernandez as this year goes on. Anyone else?
Yeah, no, that was the one, the most probable one, but still I back Raul to outscore Ayagura. Outperform and like make a better impression, that's a different question, but I think in terms of the pure points put up on the board, I mean, rookies just don't score well, do they? I mean, that's also a big part of it. They just don't score consistently. They don't score well. We have to really keep your expectations in check as far as actual production goes, and the target, the target is never pure production. It's just show enough peak to where somebody believes that peak can be developed and extracted, and then in the future will turn into consistent results. Yeah, I think all of them will be lost among the full timers in their respective manufacturers. And Chantra's had some really good Moto2 races, but honestly, I'd say his fight is with wildcarding Aleix Spargaro in terms of the points scored potentially.
So I'm going to stick with you, Val, because that means that even as the strongest Firmin Aldiger advocate on this podcast and outside the Aldiger family and Ducati hierarchy, you don't see him outscoring even other year-old Ducati riders this season.
No, but it's because they're not, the Ducati does not really have like an obvious weak link in its lineup. It has riders who have proven they can put up consistent points using available Ducati machinery. I mean, Alex Marquez is pretty good now. Franco Morbidelli got to a decent level with a GB24. The works bikes, I think, will be totally fine. Whereas Aldiger will absolutely have a learning period, and in fact, it is in Ducati's best interest to ensure that he is kept as insulated as possible from looking at those other Ducati results, from looking at the points table, from looking at anything like that. Just go out there, ride, learn, see what you can do, show us what you can do without buckling the way you appear to have buckled in Moto2 in 2024.
So with that in mind then, I'm guessing we have a Aldiger versus Agura fight to officially be Rookie of the Year. Megan, is the outcome of this obvious given the bikes they're on?
Yes. No further comments. That's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And if it's not, something's gone wrong.
Yeah. No, I do think that is fair. Interestingly, though, Val, when you were saying you don't look for results from a rookie, part of me is going, hang on, Pedro Acosta, 6th in the championship, all the things he did during 2024. But you have a point insofar as he still didn't produce the points that all his pace should have done. He still tumbled down the field on occasion. He still tumbled off the road on occasion.
Exactly.
He still did rookie things. It's just his peaks were high enough to mean he was still 6th in the championship. So He rewrote the rules for rookies.
Yeah, Pedro Acosta was 6th in the standings, but he was maybe like the 4th best performing, even combined with the bike in the season, 4th, 5th, sometimes higher. So that's, Pedro's an exception. And even then, the reason everyone's sold on Pedro, the reason Pedro is the future is not that he finished 6th in the standings, is that it's the weekends where he was much better than 6th, of which there were enough, of which there were plenty, and that's how you always judge it. I should say for the Rookie of the Year, for me, it's a different question of who scores the most and who makes the best impression. I would not be surprised if Agura makes the best impression, but yeah, I think Fermin Aldeguer will score the most.
Do you see any of them being in our top 10 ranking of riders at the end of the year in terms of the impression they're going to make?
I put Fabio Quartararo number 1 this season. Last season, sorry. For me, yes, absolutely. Look, not like number 1.
No, obviously not number 1.
But yeah, yes, why not? Why not? I think it's important to if a rookie vastly outperforms expectations and vastly outperforms the track record of other rookies, the track record of what's expected, especially under this format, I can quite easily see them sneak in. For me, you can finish 21st in the standings and be P1 in my ranking if you deserve it. I mean, that's an extreme example, but...
Well, we're on the subject of rookies. Next week's episode, if we stay on schedule and there's no breaking news, that means we rip the schedule up, will be on the next riders heading for MotoGP, the biggest talents out there who we see getting there in the next few years, answering a few questions the Members Club have asked about form in Moto2 and Moto3 over recent months. And alongside that, as a Members Club exclusive, there'll be a full uncut interview with David Alonso, Moto3 champion in pretty emphatic style. The person, no spoilers for next week's episode, but the person who is the next Acosta in terms of expectation level coming through right now. And we'll drop a few snippets from that into the main episode as well. Last question for this episode comes from Joshua Milton, who says, who will win the Japan Cup, which is the shorthand for the Yamaha versus Honda battle at the back of the field? I'm going to go Simon for this first.
The question is not who will win it. The question is how much will Fabio Quartararo win it by? And the answer to that is a long way.
Anyone got a different winner for this other than Quartararo?
No, I mean, I don't know. Is Ayagura an honorary member of the Japan Cup by being a Japanese rider and not on the Japanese bike? Because even if he is, I still think Fabio Quartararo by a lot. So I was just stalling for time.
Yeah, it's a little bit harsh on Ayagura to, as the only Japanese rider on the grid, exclude him from the Japan Cup on grounds of breaking the mold by not riding a Honda while being a Japanese rider. But yeah, ineligible. Yeah, I can't see any reason why Fabio... Thing is, though, if Fabio Quartararo isn't by far the best placed Honda and Yamaha rider, it would actually be great. Not for any negativity towards Fabio, because it would mean Alex Rins was recovering. It would mean Honda was making some progress and Mir was looking like the world champion level rider he once was again, or Johan Zarco was turning all that genius that I've banged on about on Rankings podcast into even more tangible results. But no, I can't see any other winner than Quartararo in that mini championship. But let's shake it up. Who's going to be second in the Japan Cup? Megan.
Johan Zarco.
Val.
Oh boy, I don't know. Oh my god, I don't know. Why do I have to answer this? Johan Zarco.
Simon.
Slightly resurgent Joan Mir.
Yeah.
But there's not going to be much difference in him and Zarco.
It's going to depend if Joan Mir can actually do that whole getting to a checkered flag thing that he's been a little bit reluctant to.
Yeah. That's his fundamental stumbling block.
As we found out when revisiting our predictions, this time last year we were more enthusiastic than history will judge us well for about the prospect of Honda and Yamaha resurgences. And I feel like we've been burned by that, and we're being a lot more muted in our predictions this year. And maybe the opposite will happen and they'll surge into much more impressive contention. Val?
Changing my answer to Alex Rins.
Well, that would actually be lovely. Let's actually leave it there on a feel-good note about a rider who we all hope can actually perform closer to their best in a hopefully fitter 2025. We'll be back in your ears late next week when Simon will be fresh from attending the start of Aprilia's very exciting new era as it unveils its 2025 bike for Jorge Martin and Marco Bezzecchi to ride.
The Athletic.